Welcome back to Mac's Garage. If you like what you see here today, hit the subscribe button. It helps me out and I appreciate it. I'm changing the transmission in this 92 Ram W250, and I figured this would be a good time to go over what's required to swap an NV5600 into one of these first gen Dodge Cummins trucks. Now, a couple things right off the bat. One, it's a lot easier if you start with a manual transmission truck. So if you've got the G360 5-speed manual, a lot of the parts that you'll have to otherwise source are already in the truck. Two, there are different frame heights. This one's got a 7-inch tall frame. I believe they were anywhere from about 5.5 to 8 inches, depending on what you had for a different option. This 7-inch might be as big as it gets, but measure your frame and you'll figure out what you have. This one has a 7. I think it'd be pretty hard to put this transmission in a truck with a shorter frame height. And then finally, there's a lot to this swap, and there's a chance I'll miss something. It's been a while since I originally did this, so I'm going off kind of memory and what I've got in the truck right now. So with that said, I'll grab the camera, we'll get under there and on the floor over here, and I'll show you some of the stuff that I did to make an NV5600 work in this truck. This one was a G360 5-speed truck to start with, so it's a 5-speed 4-wheel drive. 2-wheel drive, you might have slight differences, but really it's going to come down to transfer case differences, so that shouldn't be a real big deal. Alright, so we're going to start out outside the truck. This is an NP205 transfer case, and this is specifically an NP205 off of a manual transmission. This input shaft is different between the automatic and the manual. This one is larger, so it's meant to take a little bit more abuse. It's a little bit bigger input shaft, but this otherwise is an NP205. I'm not sure if you can swap that out into an automatic case if you wanted to swap the shaft. That's something you can research on your own. So once we get up under the truck, we'll start with something that's not in right now. Both of your drive shafts are going to be different. I can't remember. I feel like there was something, I took an automatic one and that may have been really close for the front, but you will need different length drive shafts for both front and rear. Up on the back of the transmission here, normally an NV5600 has a seal right in this area that seals on the input of the transfer case. The NP205 doesn't need that seal, and it does need this coupler. This coupler, like the transfer case, is unique to the manual transmission ones. This works out, it is just about perfect. So the NP205 manual transfer case bolts right onto here, and this area that normally is dry in a second gen that this came out of, or third gen, it does fill with fluid, so I don't have a problem with it, but this area back here does fill with fluid, and there's not really a way to drain it unless you take the transfer case off. All right, right below that, this plate is pretty custom. So I had to notch it here and gusset it there and there because that gives it quite a bit of strength and also gives clearance for the drive shaft to come through. And the drive shaft is actually pretty close here, but it does have clearance around this. And that's why it's built this way. And you can't really see it, but these are actually both angled too. So if I get up above, not real well, but this is cut and angled down so that it matches and everything's all happy. These are, along with this plate to make up the difference, I made a spacer here, used a longer bolt, and then used the factory first gen tranny mounts. So those are factory style first gen tranny mounts with a big spacer. The cross member is as original. However, it's in a little bit different spot. So if we get out here, this is where we're mounted now. And yes, there is a little bit of rust on the frame. This is not a show truck. I still think it's a very nice truck, but I drive it kind of a lot when everything works. And actually the hoist arm is sitting where the transmission cross member normally sits. The farthest back original hole, I think. Maybe not. Yeah, you can kind of see it maybe better up in here. So if we look in, there are 3 bolt holes there. Those are the original location. And then you can see where the cross member goes. When I did this, when I mounted this, if I remember right, I bolted the cross member all together with the transmission loaded in the truck, and then just lifted everything up to where this made contact, marked, and drilled the holes. But that's been a long time. The one that's difficult are the holes up on the top side. You need a really long drill bit and something to block you from running into the cab on those. All right, continuing forward. I don't know that this necessarily needed to be done, but this is a braided steel line and a slave and master cylinder assembly that I got from South Bend for a 2nd gen truck. The early 2nd gens, at least, for sure the early ones, I'm not sure if they changed, but the master cylinder connects in under the dash the same way as it does in these 1st gens, so you can use 2nd gen hydraulics on it to control the 2nd gen trans. Yay. It's solder. What else? As we go forward, this engine plate is much thicker than a 1st gen. You need to get the correct engine plate to go with a 24 valve that had this transmission behind it. The common rail does not work. It does not bolt onto a 12 valve block. The 24 valve plate, so 2002 and down, does hook on. The starter is the same deal. You've got to get one of those that fits the engine plate and flywheel. Flywheel and clutch is also as though you had a 24 valve. Over on this side, couple things. Now we're on the passenger side. One thing that you had to do is add a section of pipe. And it turns out that that section you add is the exact same as the amount you remove back here. So what I did is I took a chunk out back here and added it in the front, and it worked just fine. Also on the driver's side, you've got to come up with 4-wheel drive shifter location. And one of the things that I did there, and you do this before you put it in the truck, but one of the things I did is this boss is not drilled or tapped from the factory. So I drilled, this is just a solid cast iron bossing off of here. So I drilled down into about there, and I tapped that to a 3/8. And I'm pretty sure both of these holes are already drilled, but I may have also drilled one of these two. So those are also just bosses off the side. I honestly cannot remember if I had to put those in or if they were already there. As for the shifter itself, you can see I built a plate. This is where it bolts down, and it bolts down there. And then this is the original shifter out of the truck, bolts onto this plate. I also made kind of a standoff here, because that's how you got the spacing right. So I made a standoff where this now recesses, and that embossment on the transmission I showed you I drilled goes right into that. And that's just the back side. I also had to put a big hole in here to allow for the pivot point of the shifter. The rod that actually goes to the transfer case also needs to be longer, so that's what this clunky unit there is. And I was worried that this was going to be a problematic piece, but it has been on there for, I would say, at least 50,000 miles, and has not been an issue yet. So I wasn't super stoked about this when I did it, but it just kind of keeps working. So it's going to go back in here later today. Back underneath the truck, you're not really going to be able to see this, but the shifter hole is in a different location. Can't give you exact measurements on that either, but it moved. And I think that's about it. Even this this mount here, I may have had to drill that, but I made so you're gonna have to drill holes here and there, but I made the bracket so the exhaust still mounts in like it's supposed to. All right, so that's it. Like I said in the beginning, I may have missed something, maybe a couple things, but that's kind of an overview of what you need to put a NV5600 in one of these first gen Cummins trucks, and more specifically a 4-wheel drive. But again, 2-wheel drive is going to be pretty much the same thing. So thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you later.